Who's the first time that hasn't seen me speaking before? We got a few? Oh, we got a few. Right. You have.
Never seen it before.
Didn't you? You didn't interview me? Or perhaps I saw you there back in... No, when was the last one? Back in July?
July.
Yeah, no, perhaps you didn't. I know I've seen you here a couple of times when I've been since. But, anyway, my name's Jon Witterick. My claim to fame, not that there is any, was that I set up a website called Get Out of Debt Free, which was really based on the sort of like truth about money, and that the whole global banking system is basically fraudulent, which might come as no surprise to most people that are here. Anyway. What I did, I'll explain a little bit more about my background in the second bit, because I want to talk a little bit about some more sort of like philosophical stuff. But I'm going to start off with the website. Who's aware of, just to give me an idea of how to pitch it, who's aware of the website that I've got? Right, so it's about half of you, so there's a few of you that aren't. Okay. What I'll do, I'll just tell you a little bit about, apologies for the, you can see I've got problems with getting the full screen, so I'm having to sort of do it in the, I've had a few problems today. My cat ran off at the weekend, and...
Did the camera with him?
Yeah, he did. No, unfortunately he ran off and we couldn't find him, so I spent all weekend, instead of like getting on sorting this out, I looking for my cat, and then got a phone call today saying they found him. But he wasn't very well. Unfortunately, he had to be put down this afternoon. So he is actually on camera, and if you go to the ZeroGov website, there's an interview with me out in the garden at Seaview, where I used to live. And he's actually, towards the end, there's a frame where they just pan to the cat. So he's made it onto the big time truth movement. So anyway, my website, Get Out of Debt Free. I can show you the new one because I've got that up there. We've got also a few like technical problems, so I haven't had a chance to actually sort out. This afternoon I was going to sort out, sort of make sure everything was working smoothly. I obviously haven't had that option, so we're going to have to do the best we can. But the website, basically, I was sort of involved with, if you like, conspiracy, truth movement, call it what you will. I'm sure most of you who are here are interested in that sort of thing. And I realised that the banking system was basically fraudulent. And also, when I was, I started off, I'd had my own business and I sold it. And for whatever reason, I didn't get paid. And so I ended up in a lot of debt and thought, oh dear. But I'd sort of woken up a little bit to like how the banks work, and I didn't really trust them. And also, if you like, I'd woken up a little bit on the sort of, if you like, spiritually, which is very difficult to put into words. I'm going to be talking a little bit about that later. But what I did, I sort of realised, okay, there's nothing I can do. I've got to accept this situation. But it was very interesting because the banks actually put the debt out to debt collectors, and I realised afterwards they actually sell this debt for pence in the pound. And the sort of debt collectors, what they would do, they'd sort of say, one minute they'd say they'd be chasing me for £5,000, which was the amount that was in the bank, and the next moment they'd double the figure, or another debt collector would, you know, they'd give up. Another debt collector would come along and say it's £10,000, and I'm thinking, hang on, that's sort of, something's really strange. And realising that debt collectors actually buy these debts for like pence in the pound. I'm thinking, this is madness. So they're buying this debt and then multiplying it. So I sort of said to them, right, you know, how do you actually get to this figure? And started challenging them. And that's when I started getting onto the internet and actually finding other people who were challenging the actual system itself. And that's when I realised that I came across a book by Mary Elizabeth Croft. And it was basically her sort of what she spoke about as far as challenging institutions, that basically nobody was doing template letters based on her information. So what I did, I took her information and sort of changed it a little bit, added to a little bit, and then basically made the letters and made them available on the internet at getoutofdebtfree.org. Okay? So, and that's basically, that was about 3 years ago, and it's now built up a big forum. We've got, I don't know, we've got a few thousand people signed up, but we've got a few people and a couple of people in the room that, who's been on the forum at Get Out of Debt Free, you know? Yeah, so we've got, yeah. So there's a few of us. The last talk we actually did, it was great. We had like a forum reunion, and I've got a few pictures of that from the iPhone. But we had people come literally from all over the country. We got it on the forum, and everyone that, no, those people on the forum decided to all turn up. So we had people over from Dublin, up from Nottingham, you know, literally West Country, all over the country. So that was quite a special night. Anyway, the website, let's just see, I've got the, right. So as I start off all my presentations, what I don't want anyone to do, because I'll be talking about, this is my view on everything, it's not, you know, if it's something that you don't agree with, if you've got a quick question, do bring in. If it's a longer question, save it to the end. If it's going to take, if it's a quick question, or you want to say something, do come in. But if it's a longer question, save it to the end, and I will answer it either at the end in questions, or you know, we'll sit down for 5 minutes afterwards if it's a particularly complicated thing. So, but basically, don't believe anything I say. Because I wouldn't want anyone to start saying, I don't want to say that I know everything, but I've done a little bit of research, and funny enough, Malcolm here has done a lot of research and keeps sending me some wonderful emails and information all about how fraudulent the global banking system is. But I'm not really going to cover that much, so much, you know, I've covered that in the past. And the ultimate ignorance is the rejection of something you know nothing about, but refuse to investigate. So, yeah, that was Dr. Wayne Dyer. If you're ever bored and you've got broadband, Google or get onto YouTube and look up Dr. Wayne Dyer. Is anyone aware of him? Yeah, there's a few of you. Just some wonderful, wonderful little sort of like, if you like, spiritual treats, if you like. He just got some very profound things that he says, but he's got some lovely stuff on the on YouTube. Oh no, that can't be right. Oh, that's the end. Right, okay. Oh, right. Start again. I'm doing it with a different button. So yeah, right. I mustn't press that one, otherwise it takes me right to. I just pressed end, and it takes me to the end. Great. Okay. This is something, it's right, Malcolm's not looking at this slide, this is something he sent me. And I thought that if I was going to say anything about the global banking system, I believe this was Larry Hannigan quoting Lord Acton. Is that correct? And this is something that Malcolm sent me, I think, yesterday. And I thought, in a sentence, he explains it beautifully, so that I don't have to explain the whole banking you know, basically the whole banking fraud. And he says the sole purpose was to explain the simple maths of reality and the current banking system. And basically this is it. It's 100 plus nothing does not equal 105. What they're trying to say there is they create this money out of thin air, they then charge us interest. Well, it can't be paid. The reason we're having these cuts, you know, it was yesterday that it all came out. I haven't got a telly, so I missed most of it, fortunately. But the reason we're having all these cuts and austerity measures, and we've all got to cut down, and lots of people are going to lose their work, and sorry, yeah, they're going to be out of work, and you know, basically, if you want to go on to further education, you have to pay for it all yourself. It's all quite scary. It's all based on this idea. The banks have basically been bleeding us and bleeding us. Does anyone tell me, who are we in debt to?
The banks.
The banks. But surely, if all the banks are in debt and all the countries are in debt, and there's only about China and Saudi Arabia that have actually got any so-called money, it's ridiculous that basically most countries have got these huge deficits, and they owe the banks all the money. Basically, there's not enough money. The idea that we can pay off the deficit is a complete joke. Complete joke. Get on to the Bank of England website, and you can look up in their figures. They've got some really good figures. You can look up, and it'll actually tell you the different money supplies. You've got the M1, M2, and I think the M2 money supply is basically everything that's in circulation and in bank accounts. So as far as I'm concerned, that's all the money, not speculating on markets or bonds or anything. Basically the money that people can either spend or get out of their bank accounts. Now, that amount is way smaller than the deficit. So there's not enough money in circulation, purely because of this thing. When they lend money, they haven't actually got the money, they have to borrow the money. And so they borrow it with interest, and of course, I'm sure most of you know this, the interest is already, doesn't exist. So they're giving us two things happen. One, the money supply has to grow exponentially, which it is, and we'll come to that, more of that in a minute. And the other thing is that people have to default, not just people, but countries, organisations, and individuals have to default because the money, there's no money. They're charging interest on money they've created out of thin air. And so this is why. It's so simple that I've said before, like a 10-year-old child can understand it. Because if all the money we had on us tonight, I've only got credit cards, so that doesn't count. But the actual money, say if the paper money and the coins, if we all started trading within us, there's a fixed amount of money. And so if we started lending people money, obviously we can't go beyond the boundaries of reality. In Monopoly, the same thing, you've got a fixed money supply, except that even in Monopoly, if you look up the rules of Monopoly, you can actually, if the bank runs out of money, you can actually write out notes on bits of paper. That's what they actually say. And that's exactly what they're doing with quantitative easing, which is remarkable. Anyway, successfully connected, fantastic. Don't know what to. So 100 plus nothing does not equal 105, and that charging interest on something that is created out of nothing makes it impossible to repay, giving great power to those who create money out of nothing, i.e. the banks. Money is not a commodity, it's a system of debit and credit bookkeeping, nothing more. But they've taken, basically, the money is a balance of our wages, effectively, of our, what we buy and what we buy and sell and what we earn. But they've taken it into something else that they make. The most highly paid people, in this country, probably the people in the city. And all they're doing is speculating on our labour. It's madness, and they're creating huge amounts of money, aren't they? Well, they're not. They're creating lots and lots of zeros on a computer. Yeah. So. Right. And there, I'm just going to show that the whole thing is actually on Inquiring Minds there. So if you go onto Inquiring Minds, we'll look at Lord Acton and see what he had to say. So the whole article is actually on Inquiring Minds. So if you go to, is everyone aware of Malcolm's wonderful website, which is what we're here about? Yes.
Money is basically a means of exchange.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't have a constant value. The exchange is constantly varying.
If it was based on market, like if all of us in this room pulled our money together and started trading within us, among us, we could actually decide a market price. But if one of us could create money out of thin air, we would be at a huge advantage over everyone else. So it's not a level playing field. So there isn't a sort of like a balance that the market can find. because the bankers are creating, instead of having to go to work and create money, they can actually create it out of thin air. They only need, if they have £100, under fractional reserve banking, they can lend out 900. And that's what fractional reserve banking is. And of course, at one time, we had our gold, we gave our gold to the bankers. And the gold that we actually had as a country, we gave that to the Bank of England. That all disappeared. It's gone. So at one time, a pound sterling, that was equivalent to a pound of sterling, a pound in weight of sterling silver. Now, what's it worth now? You wouldn't get an ounce of gold for a natural pound, would you? Because the currency has been gradually drained away. The only reason we get inflation is because there's more money in circulation, because they keep adding more money into circulation. The only time where we've had deflation is when suddenly the banks start pulling the money. This idea that inflation is to do with the, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, if the leaf was I try and keep everything really, really simple so I get my head around it. But basically, if people have used seashells, they've used anything in different countries. But if you use the leaf as a means of exchange, just as a token, suddenly in autumn, as all the leaves fall down, everyone would have loads of leaves. Inflation would go through the roof. And then in spring, when there's hardly any leaves, at the end of winter, then obviously we get deflation, because that's how they control the money supply. And if you look historically what happened during the collapse in the 30s, that's actually what happened. They were actually manipulating the crashes of the 20s and 30s were manipulated by the central banks. You can look it up. And they had a field day, because they ended up, all the little banks went like at the moment, because at the moment, this isn't happening by accident, it was bound to happen. But the little banks go bust and the big banks buy them up. And people foreclose. How many people are being kicked out of their homes because they can't pay it? They've been boarded up and kicked out of their homes because they can't pay the bankers. It's wicked. It's set up purely because coming to this, creating £100 and then charging 105. That's all there is. That's all there is. And in the Bible, not that I get into quoting the Bible an awful lot, but I think, is it Leviticus? It actually says, it actually warns us about usury, doesn't it? Yeah. And that's why, an awful lot of religions or a lot of philosophies, whatever, weren't allowed to do this. And still Muslims still now, the banks have actually got around that somehow by creating special mortgages for them, which is great, But
Halal.
yes, yeah.
Halal mortgages.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's almost like they've sort of cheated a little bit. But anyway. Right. Okay, so we'll just have a look at the sort of latest financial news. And I think I've got a few pages here. It would have actually come up. Now, this is interesting. Right, I'm going to have to do this little bit. I'm going to have to do the news at the end because we've lost our connection. We did have I got into Malcolm and we had got quite a good broadband signal here, but a lot of the stuff I'm actually getting straight off the internet, so I'll download it at the break. So what I'll do, I'll tell you a little bit about the, basically there's a lot of things, I'll go on to the things in a minute, but there's a lot of stuff about a second credit crunch coming, there's another round of quantitative easing, so it's like all these cuts that we're supposed to having is supposed to be saving all this money to be able to pay back. You realise we're paying back more at the moment than we are paying on education. Just on interest, not actually paying it back. Sorry, that is just the interest on the national debt. And who's that interest going to? I mean, it's like a rhetorical question. It is going to, I mean, can anyone tell me?
Foreign banks.
Foreign banks, but
Banks.
central banks.
And who owns those banks?
Yeah, well, who owns those banks? It's very interesting when you look at
Follow the money.
all the, when you actually look, there's a website, I can't remember what it's called, but I can certainly, if anyone's interested, I can certainly email them. It's a French one, and what it does, it looks at all the different banks, and basically who owns, and I looked at Barclays, because funnily enough, I'm going to Barclays head office at the end of the month, and going to get a meal out of them, and it's because I work for a charity. I work for a charity, and we access some funds from another charity that Barclays sponsor, and they think I'm doing great work. They know nothing about the website, where we're actually costing an awful lot of money, actually, which is great. And you know, I have to put a suit on and look like one of them for a day. I doubt whether I'll shave, but I've still got a dark suit, so I sort of look half sensible with it. But I mean, Barclays are typical. They on the website you can look up a lot of things about them, and basically they're not. They invest in arms. They invest in things like landmines. They've got a very, very low rating for ethical investments. The way they treat their staff is appalling. The co-op bank, although they're just as bad when you get on the wrong side of them, they actually are far more ethical in their investments. They've got a much higher score. But what Barclays do, they put perhaps a couple of £1 million into this little project where it helps a few homeless people, which is great, and it certainly helps a lot of clients that I'm working with. I'm working with people that have been homeless and generally involved with drugs and alcohol. Now, it helps those people a great deal, but it's such a splash in the ocean. But it allows them to get a bit of publicity saying, oh, look how good we are. It's like BP putting bloody solar cells on top of petrol stations, as if, it's what they call greenwash, isn't it? It's like whitewash, but it's pretending that they're environmentally friendly when they're not. It's scary. Anyway, what I'll do, I'll try and bypass the technical problems. We'll have to see how we do. Otherwise, I'll just have to move the. Oh, there we are. That was what I was hoping to get onto. There we go. UK on the cusp of a second banking failure. High street banks are on the verge of another credit crunch, and taxpayers may be forced to plug. I mean, the first time we bailed them out, didn't anyone wonder what's going on there? And what's funny enough is I've actually been predicting the the collapse of the global financial system, and I actually said it's going to be, well, the last quarter of this year. So I haven't got an awful lot longer. But had everything suddenly been looking rosy, I'd be thinking, oh my God, not that I worry about my credibility, because the first time, can you remember the first time round? It was at 2007, and I said, oh, and was it you that asked me whether it was September?
Yeah.
And somehow I got it spot on with the blowing my own trumpet now. But I reckon it's going to be September, October, November. By December, I think we're going to be in serious problem. And that's not just one thing, but this is the warning signs. I mean, the fact that we've just bailed the banks out, well, surely we don't bail them out again. How much can we bail them out? I mean, where's all this money going to... Surely, we're just going to say we're bankrupt. And the only reason we're bankrupt, is because we've got this fraudulent system. Sorry, yeah, what were you going to say?
I was only going to say, where did the money come from to bail them out?
Well, we've had to earn that.
Yeah,
they're stealing our labour.
Do you get the money from the banks to bail up the banks?
Yeah. I mean, why they can't bail themselves out?
I mean, it's a printing
Because,
press, isn't it?
we're quite. Why can't they just print more money? Because, basically they're trying to steal our property, they're trying to steal our labour. They're trying to put us under pressure. And in the, you know, and I'll probably mention a little bit later on why I think that's happening. So. I'll just look at some of the other
Just
headlines.
need to watch Max Kaiser.
I do, yeah. Brilliant. If anyone wants to know what's actually going on at the moment, do look at Max Kaiser, because has anyone seen him?
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Tuesdays and Thursdays on, there's that Al Jazeera,
Russian TV,
Russia TV,
Russian TV,
RT.
8:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
and repeated during the day.
Yeah. Max Kaiser, he's very entertaining. He's actually been involved. He's actually been involved in the banking system. He's been one of these corrupt people.
That's why he lives in France.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Was his name Simon a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah.
Simon, another one. Been an investment banker, made lots of money, had to get out because he couldn't do it anymore. Another one is obviously Charlie from the Love Police. He was, there's pictures of him. Went to see his presentation in Bournemouth, and there's a picture of him at the horses. What's the big horse racing? Ascot.
Yeah.
He's at Royal Ascot. He's got a top hat. He's got a lovely girl by his side. He's got a big bottle of champagne glasses. He was there. He was like making loads of money out of it, and decided no, can't do it anymore. Max Kaiser. The great thing is that he's actually been involved in setting up funding for films and things like that. But he actually set up basically like a stock exchange for funding films and stuff. A few little cuts, that's basically lines of people in soup kitchens and whatever. See what's happening in... I don't want to sort of... The last thing I want to do is like create any fear, because I honestly think that the system has to collapse. It's got to collapse anyway. It can't. It's got. It's only a matter of when, and if I'm wrong, it's only going to be because I predicted it at the wrong time. It has to collapse. It can't carry on as it's going. Full stop. Purely because that 100 and 105. That's the simple reason. We've had it now for what, over 100 years, no, since 1930, I think. When certain things have happened which have set up the system in the way it is. So it hasn't actually been going on only just a bit over 100 years, really, in its current format. And now the money supply is going exponential. It has to go exponential. So, but it's interesting, very interesting.
Most watched, it's got at the top there too.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's quite remarkable there. Most watched. And I don't think I can stream videos at the moment, which is a bit of a shame. And then the other one is... I don't think... We can't rule out another credit crunch. Well, I think it's going to be... I think we've had the credit crunch. I think the next time it's actually going to be a full-on collapse. And I'll just give you... And it's Mervyn King the whole time. Hints at another round of quantitative easing, which is creating money out of thin air. That's not even with customers. That's basically creating bonds and just that is doing exactly what Mugabe's been doing, creating money. That's what happens in Italy when they end up with wheelbarrows full of money. And already, have you noticed the food prices at the moment? It's like, if you want a computer screen or a new computer, the prices are generally going down. You know, I can get a 19-inch flat screen not for television, a monitor, a computer monitor, for just like 100 quid. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cheap. But when I'm trying to buy fresh vegetables and food, just little things, packet of crisps in a service station, or a little shop, you normally think, well, 40p or something, 69p, and that's gone up. I noticed that because occasionally I'll just like grab a packet of crisps and just Walker's crisps, nothing special. And I'm just thinking, the percentage rise in food prices, nobody's suddenly worried about it all, and I'm just thinking, my God, it's costing me over £1 to get a lettuce. It's
it's scary. You can still get it.
Well, yeah.
Even if you're prepared to pay for it.
Yeah.
What about when you can't get it?
Well, yeah, there is that. So there we go. Mervyn King hints at a fresh round of quantitative easing. Bank of England governor says strong case. Now the scary thing about that is that, you know, we could end up with runaway inflation. Why that? We should be having much higher inflation than we are actually having at the moment. And you're thinking, why aren't we? Well, what's actually, in my understanding, and I'm not an economist, I know very little, as I say, my understanding, I keep at a really basic level so I can understand it. I think had I been through London School of Economics, you get so full of all their mind-bending sort of formulas, is that you can't see the wood for the trees. But the reason why I think that we haven't got hyperinflation at the moment, or even something called stagflation, where, you know, the economy is not moving but prices are going up, which is more like, is because the banks have basically had so, you know, they've invested in so many dodgy things. They've now got to increase their sort of capital before they can actually. There's the Basel III banking. Has anyone come across that? Basel III banking, where they basically said in Switzerland, it didn't really hit the news much, but it basically said, you know, at the moment, if you've got 100 quid, you can lend out 900. Well, they're actually saying now that if you've got 100 quid, you can only lend out 800. Now, for the banks, that's a huge amount of money that they've got to grab back, which is why they're not lending it to businesses to be able to get, you know, the economy moving. But then it's mad because they talk about, oh, it's the market down, it's this, it's that. But I'm sure everyone here wants to work or doesn't choose to want to just sit at home and do nothing all day. Apart from me and Ian, perhaps, because we spend a lot of time on the internet and doing stuff. But we're very busy people, yeah. But it's like there's not a shortage of people wanting to work, and there's not a shortage of people wanting to consume. All over the world, you see that. You know, you graduates now are coming out of university, and they're lucky if they can get work seriously. They're lucky if they can get work in McDonald's. Yeah, it's madness. It's madness. So it's I don't know. It's I get lost for words with the whole situation. And what I can't understand is when you see people on the television talking about it as if it's all normal, and it's not. It's fraudulent. It really is. And this is how Max Geyser gets. He understands. The great thing is, I've got this very, very basic level of what I think of. Like, I wouldn't want to get any more complicated than a 12-year-old could understand, because that's my sort of level of understanding. And if I start going into too deep stuff, then everyone gets a bit lost. But if I keep it really simple, then we all understand it. Max Geyser understands it at a complex level as well. But he still talks about, the banks, he refers to them as financial terrorists. And he gets really angry and starts shouting. It's very, very entertaining. But he can explain exactly why Greece was, you know, the reason why Greece went like it was because Goldman Sachs were in there falsifying the accounting. And this is standard. And they were sort of saying, oh, we're going to do this. And it's, I don't know, it's so, Goldman Sachs, if you look at this French website, and I will actually find out the name of it, what it does, it shows you who owns what in each. So if you look at Barclays, and I looked at Barclays, you realise that the shareholders are all major companies. Okay, so one company is connected to all these other companies, and another company, its shareholders are all these. So if you like, it's a big mess of all these companies all connected to each other. And if you drew it on a wall with little spiders between them about who owns bits, it'd be like all these dots with lines between them and a big web. And it's not like there's BP. The idea that BP is British, and some of the newspapers were reporting were saying that, oh, Britain, it might, it might upset relations between Britain and America. Well, that was ridiculous. And it was false reporting, because the biggest shareholders in BP, I can't remember who they were, but they're American institutions. And the majority of BP is owned by Americans. And the last CEO, I haven't got a sort of memory that can shoot out names, but I can certainly look it up. Yeah, was it? I know, but I know it was an ex-banker that was the new CEO of BP. It's all just one big commercial capital corporate. They all work together. It looks like BP, or it's a British company. Because do you know what BP was called before it was BP?
Anglo-Iranian.
Anglo-Persian, I think it was, or it might have been Iranian for a while. Yeah. It was the nationalised. Well, no, it became nationalised. Do you know why the CIA was created? The CIA was created. It started off with Britain saying, well, it's when we sort of went into all these little third world countries, like Iran, and or Persia as it was at the time. And basically what they did, I can't remember it, but look it up, check it out. We went into Iran and basically said, we'll help you develop your oil fields. Well, yeah, basically we did, and we developed their oil fields, and we basically nicked all their oil and paid them peanuts. And after a while they're thinking, hang on, we're not getting a very good deal out of this, so what we'll do, we'll nationalise our oil fields and kick. And they did, and they kicked out. And it was, at the time, it was called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company or something like that. And the Americans got really worried about it, and there's no way that MI5 was going to be able to do anything. They created the CIA to basically destabilise Iran the first time round. And if you want to read a book on how it's done, I think look up the Shock Doctrine, and it's not a weirdo conspiracy book. It explains exactly how it's done and the methods that they use to basically destabilise countries. And they overthrew the government, and basically then they called it, rather than the Anglo-Persian, they called it BP and made it British. But that's basically, it's an American corporation. And that's why American police were actually involved covering up the oil spill. Basically, if you want to go to the beach and there was a beach you're not allowed on, basically American police were acting very, very heavy-handed. So, just see how I'm doing on time.
You tell them about the builders who ripped up the Barclays Bank in Bournemouth.
No, I didn't know about this.
They bricked it up, it was in the news.
I didn't know.
They ripped the door up.
Oh, right. See, I
turned up
don't.
early in the morning before the bank opened, brick all the doorway up.
Because they
Fantastic.
couldn't get them in.
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, what's happening is because you're getting these. I used to have a small business. As I mentioned, I had my own business, and the bank was a lifeline to me because your money doesn't all come in. Most of my money would come in at Christmas, and they were happy with me because I could always pay off my overdraft at one point in the year, and then as I go through the year, it would build up and I would pay it off again. But it was quite important, for me to be able to get funds because that's the way it's set up. You pay so much in tax that you have to borrow money. If we didn't have to pay the amounts of tax we pay, a majority of which is actually paying off the national debt anyway. So, anyway, I'll just see if there's one more. I think there might be one more news item I wanted to show you. And this is quite a big one actually, if it will come up. But it's basically other currencies are now decoupling from America. So it's not the fastest broadband in the world, but we're a little bit away from the... it'll come up in a second. But basically what's happening is other currencies are pulling back from America, which means the dollars, people are actually inside, are actually betting on the dollar collapsing now. So, and I don't want to sort of be spreading doom and gloom, but I really think the whole thing has to collapse fairly soon. Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll leave that. I don't know if it'll come up at some point. Right, what I did want to do is have a look at, right, let's just see if we can have, I don't know how quick. Right, so that is, right, this is a sneak preview. Your very, very I don't know if you've actually seen this, because I did that for some of the people on the right. Okay, that's it. It's gone. Sorry about that. You had a very sneak preview anyway. No. Okay, we've lost it. I'll see. What I'll do, I'll leave that for now, and what I'd like to do now, I'll sort out my connection problems and try and download everything so that I can show you. I did want to show you a little bit about the new website that we've got, which is, we've actually just got it on a URL, it's not actually on Get Out of Debt Free, but unfortunately we can't get it up and I've lost connection. So what I'll do, I'll sort it out when we go. We're going to have a quick break before we go on to the second half. But what I would like to do is, I've got my good friend Ian Thorniley that I'd like to invite up here, because he's been just doing, he's very much into the free man on the land, and we've had, we have great conversations, and we actually had a little group where we sort of met up. I can't remember where we did meet up, but it was through the waffle group, wasn't it? We were Wessex Association for Free Men on the Land, so we were wafflers and we did a lot of waffling, probably still do. But Ian's just been coming at this whole bank, whereas I've been sort of, with Get Out of Debt Free, I was going to show you some of the ways that we're actually dealing with the banks, and we're actually saying, well, look, if we owe you any money, can you prove, A, that we had a legal or lawful, really a lawful contract, show me the accounting where the money came from, and if you can prove that, I'm quite, and a couple of other things that I can't remember, and if you can actually prove that, then I'm quite happy to pay the money off. So we say, we don't sort of say, well, we're not paying you. We say, yes, I'll quite happily pay you if you can lawfully provide me with the documents to say that I owe you anything. Now, sometimes they turn round and say, oh, well, we'll have your house off you, or we do this, we do. They can't have my house off me because I haven't got a house. What Ian's been doing is he's been helping a few people. Now, well, I'll let you explain what you're doing. So, but he's been using the bank's rules to actually have a go at the banks. So, introduce Ian, please. I'll get out of the way. Good evening.
I don't like to say, as John always says, don't believe me, check it out for yourself. So I'm very conscious of giving any advice whatsoever. But certainly from a personal point of view, I've learned, we all know that they thrive on fear, they thrive on ignorance, and they win using their rules. And sometimes, regardless of how you might challenge them, they just plough on regardless. And as we know, as they've proved, they're quite capable and quite happy to take anything you own. They'll take your car, they'll take your house, they'll take anything that they consider theirs. Now we know it's all fraudulent, that doesn't stop them. But where John says we don't have a contract, or the contract isn't lawful, they do carry on regardless. And there are lots of instances where they will just plough through regardless of any moral obligations. They get what they want. So I just decided to try and take them on at their own game. And when you actually look into it, you find that while they've created this system, and they rely on us not knowing it, when you actually do delve into it, it can almost be regarded as quite fair. What it means is that they themselves have to play by certain rules, and if they don't follow those rules, then they can't use it to their benefit. I mean, more so now, they're feeling the pinch, and not too long ago, people were challenging credit cards, they were challenging mortgages, they were challenging all sorts. And they ran for cover because they didn't really know, when the likes of John came up with these very valid arguments, they didn't know how to handle them. But now you can see it more and more. They're under pressure. They're grasping at straws, and they're coming at people for outrageous agreements that don't exist. They're making stuff up. They're telling lies. They're appearing in court. They're doing all sorts of things, and the gloves are really off. And the only message I have is we've got to fight them on the beaches. We've got to fight them everywhere, and this is as much a valid fight as anywhere. The point is they've been so they've had it their own way for so long. They've got sloppy. And all these agreements that should have been in place, the law says so, they weren't, because they didn't think there was any need to. But people are beginning to get wise to it, and people are beginning to realise that, hang on a minute, you're not allowed to do that. The point is putting it over correctly. You know, you see so many times that people will argue that a judge was unfair, and the judge never listened. Unfortunately, they've written the rules, and we have to know those rules. But the point is, when you get to learn them, when you get to know the rules, you can actually make some headway. So the same applies. Do your research, check it out. Just because they've decided to use their courts, it doesn't end it all. They've been sloppy. They don't get it right all the time. And I mean, when you trace through an alleged debt, in the first instance there needs to be an agreement. We know that. John asked for that. Show me the lawful agreement. Now, if they plough on regardless, even if they get it past stage one, and they start worrying, because not everyone can put up the argument that John says. Not everyone can stand there and have that argument, for whatever reason. So if you go through proper channels, well, there has to be an agreement. It has to follow a certain format. There has to be certain things in there. And if those things aren't in there, then they cannot enforce it. That's the law. So getting to know that is very empowering. Even if it's got that, there are certain things they have to do. There are certain procedures they have to follow. Now, again, standing up, shouting, and standing there, the bottom feeders, and they will try every trick in the book. They will lie, they will create documents. And they win. They win in so many ways, but they win because people are ignorant. They win because people don't realise what they have to do. And it's all about going and learning the rules. But it's all out there. It's on the internet. There's a lot of bad stuff on the internet, naturally. There's a lot of disinformation in everything we look at. But generally speaking, there's nothing that they do that we can't learn. There's nothing. Yes, they do it more than us. They do it all day long. They've been to law school. They've learnt all these things. But a little information can be dangerous. We all know that. But also, learn the rules. Take your time and go and investigate and check it out. Find out what to say, so that when you then ultimately get in front of the judge, if necessary, you can say, I did this, I tried that, I tried that. So many people, they believe they're right, they know they're right, they will try and say so, but they're talking to someone who doesn't understand their way of thinking. A judge is very much in the system. They do this, they've been doing it for years and years and years, and when you stand up in front of them and you say what John says, it's news to him. He thinks you've lost your nut, you got it off your trolley. So he throws it out. These ways of doing it, and there's ways of doing it slowly and surely by using their rules. Just because they know how to do it doesn't give them the God-given right. They haven't got a monopoly on it. So my only message is now more than ever, we have to stand and fight, because they're coming. They want to take whatever they can while they can. So my message is to do the research. It's not beyond us. It's a little bit difficult, yes. There are people who will help. I help where I can, because you can point people in the right direction. But it's not a foreign language. Well, it is actually legalese. But most of it we can understand. There's nothing that you can't learn. Don't be frightened of them. They rely on our ignorance and they rely on our fear. And suddenly when you start putting questions back at them, they don't like it. And just like the schoolyard bully, they'll go and pick on the easy target. They don't want to challenge, they don't want to fight. So I've looked at various alleged debts. When you examine the banking system, what they do with it, not only do they make the money up, they'll then go and sell it elsewhere. You know, proof. If I knocked on your door and said you owe me a load of money, you'd say, says who? Prove it. Well, that's the same for anything. But they're allowed to do this, they're allowed to do that, and they browbeat you, they'll baffle you, they'll bully you, and they want you to give in. It doesn't have to be that way. When you look at it more closely, you find the things that they do, and they do a lot of bad things, and it's just a question of piecing it together and explaining it properly in front of the man that matters. The ideal situation would be, of course, you would never get into court. You would write your letters in a standard, in a proper manner, to get them to know that you know what you're doing, and you don't want to go in there. My message is to learn it. There's lots in there that they don't do right. There's lots of places you can get help, and challenge them. Don't let them push it this extra bit now. Don't let them get away with this final audacity, because they're getting more and more outrageous, and there isn't a stunt they won't pull. Good luck to anyone who might want to challenge things.
Ian, thanks. You say there's sites where you can find information out. What's a good site for, what sort of sites to get started?
Well, Consumer Action Group was probably the flagship. But even on there now, see what they've done, they've changed the rules lately, and they've made it much harder to challenge them. So current agreements are going to be very, very difficult to challenge, apart from the lawfulness of them in the first place. But certainly the older agreements, the paperwork still needs to be in place. Now they've changed the rules, so they can effectively make things up. They can say this is what the agreement was, honest. So it's very, very difficult. But people are beginning to drift away from it. It's getting harder and harder because of what's happening. You know, you're beginning to see this. But it doesn't stop. The basic argument is proof. Where is the contract? So Consumer Credit Group, Consumer Action Group is probably the main one. There are various others. There's various penalty charges is one. Legal beagles. There's several. If anyone wanted to take my email address, I can point them in several directions. And that is basically challenging them for what they're supposed to do in the court, what they have to do to follow procedure. And if they don't do it, you can stop them.
Great. Anyone got any questions for him while he's up here?
Sorry?
I could hardly hear what you were saying.
Probably the
Shall I say it
wonderful singers downstairs. I think.
Mel was quiet.
I'm,
Always quiet downstairs.
as I say, I'm very careful to offer. I don't offer advice. People do ask for help, and I'm happy to point them in direction. If anyone in particular has got a particular problem, by all means, I'll try and point them in the right direction. I don't know if anyone is actually in here. Is there anyone that's actually challenged a credit card, for instance? Successfully?
So far.
Mm-hmm. Using Consumer Credit Act or John's?
John stuff.
Yeah. So again, it's valid, but they will try and baffle you. They will try and say it doesn't apply. They'll try and say it's not English law. You know, they'll say all these things, hoping to put you off. That's the name of the game. Stick to your guns. You know, because the truth will out, ultimately. And if they say, well, we don't care what you say, we're going to go to court anyway. Fine, there is another level. That isn't the end of it. They still have to answer the same questions in there. They'll tell you they don't. They'll tell you they're going to do this, that and the other. But no, the same applies. And if you do it correctly, you can still keep them at bay.
What do you mean there? What do you mean? What are you talking about challenging a credit card? In what way?
Well, the credit when you enter into a credit agreement, the credit agreement has to be done as per the Consumer Credit Act. 1974 was the main one that was used. And in a nutshell, if they don't do it to the letter of the law, then if certain things are omitted from that agreement, they're not entitled to enforce it. The courts will not enforce it. In a nutshell, it was brought in to protect consumers from predatory banks, predatory lenders. So they said, if you're going to create an agreement, it must be in a given format. it must have certain words in it, it must state certain things such as the interest rates and the likes. And if that's not present, then you cannot enforce it in a court. But they won't tell you that, and you don't know that until you ask them for it. So there's certain procedures you can follow to see if their agreement is valid. Not your rules, you're not being difficult, that's what Parliament said. Parliament said if you want to raise an agreement, then it must be in a given format. So you ask them if it is. And that's what people have been doing. Begin to realise that they've got so blasé about it, they never even bothered with agreements. People filled in an application form and said, that'll do. Now it's coming back to bite them, and now which has caused a lot of these problems. But that's only their own undoing, because they couldn't be bothered to do it right. We try and follow procedures, we try and follow the law. They decided they didn't need to.
So what is it that you're not paying, or you're refusing to pay, say on a credit card? So if you've got a credit card and you went and bought a telly, say, and that's on your book, so you're saying, I'm not going to pay for that telly, I'm not going to...
The law says that for them to enter into a credit agreement with you, they must tell you certain things. They must inform you of what your obligations are within that credit agreement. And the law says that if they don't do that, they cannot then claim that money back. They're not entitled to, because they didn't follow the law.
So you would go and buy stuff and then not pay for it, basically?
What you would...
For what, you know, you want a legitimate... translate, as if you bought it with your own money, you bought the television, you paid for it, so you're going to get goods that you're then choosing not to pay for.
The point is, you're challenging the agreement, okay? Now, whether you've used it or not, there might be a zero balance, there might be £1,000 on it. But it's Parliament that decided that the agreement must be in a given format, not me.
So are there people out there saying, getting a credit, saying, right, I'm going to spend and buy loads of stuff and then not pay for it? And as a way of kind of, because that could be abused. I mean,
absolutely.
Not let them get away with stuff.
No, you're right, that would be an
But
abuse.
who's abusing the situation as it is? Sorry, it's the banks that are abusing the situation by creating this money out of thin air and then charging interest on it.
So as you just said there, you go and buy something, okay? Now, the chap who sold you the television has been paid for it, yes? And he can pay his supplier, so he's not bothered. You've got your television, you're not bothered. The banks want their money.
So like it's a form of protest rather than...
Well, where did the money come from? I mean, the point is, where did that money come from? The bank's demanding that money off you, plus interest.
But it begs the question, what is money?
Absolutely, yeah. But they will take your house, that's very good. If you don't pay them what they've made up, if you don't give it them back, plus the interest, what John's referring to there is it's a piece by that fella Hannigan, and it was called I Want the World, or I Want the Earth, plus 5%. That's what they're saying.
Yes, but being devil's advocate here, if you've got Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith and Mr. Bloggs, and Mr. Jones wants to borrow £100 from the bank, and the bank is the person who's got the money, then how can Mr. Bloggs and Mr. Smith also borrow £100 unless the first one gives an interest so that they can use that interest to give the other people money? I mean, the money doesn't come from nowhere, does it?
Yes,
It does.
that's exactly
It does. Yes, it does.
Fractional reserve banking.
They don't have any money.
They don't have any money, there is no money.
Fractional reserve banking dictates that they can lend 9 times the amount they've got in reserve. Now, this is what John spoke again about earlier. They've just changed now the capital requirements. What's happened is that if they lent £1 million, for instance, it meant they had to have £100,000 on deposit. Okay. Now they said you can't do that. You can't lend £1 million. You can only lend 900,000. So they've already lent the money, so they can't get that back. Well, they're trying to. So what they're trying to increase, they need to increase the capital requirements. So they've got to get as much as they can from anywhere. and they'll do it, and they'll do it by whatever way, shape or form. But the fact remains that with £100,000 on deposit allows them to lend up to £1 million. It does come from nowhere.
Yeah, but so basically it's our greed, isn't it? Because if I haven't got enough money to buy my telly, I don't get a telly, and then we have no problems.
But that's exactly it. But they fed the greed. They've made it easy for people to get that. Do you want a credit card? Do you want the credit? Why wait? Have it now. We'll lend it you. They've created the situation. Yeah, of course, we've gone through it hook, line and sinker. No one can argue with that.
And the government as well, spending way beyond its means. Well,
the government are now saying we need to get this money back because of our deficit. We're spending too much. The interest. Who decided that? Who spent this money? On who say so? Did they tell you they were going to do it? You know, suddenly we've got this massive debt now. It didn't happen overnight, did it? But the point is, yes, it has come from nowhere. You're right. We're in a situation now where people won't wait. As you say, your mum and dad, my mum and dad used to save up the money and buy it when they had it. No one can disagree with that. But they've created a situation now where kids, 18-year-olds, can go and buy a car. No problem, because they can get it on credit. So
my daughter's in £10,000 worth of debt.
there you go. Now, because it was made available to her,
Absolutely.
why would she say no? She can live for today. So who's created the system and why? And if you lend 100 of anything, but you want 105 back, as John touched on, where does the 5 come from? It has to come. You've not got it. It has to come from somewhere. You borrow it off a friend, whatever. There's 5 coming out where it wasn't there before. The whole system is designed to take it off people. It has to fail. People have to fail. Businesses have to fail because there isn't enough money to pay it back. But what I'm trying to say is John's take on it is about the system, the fraudulence of it all. What I'm trying to say is that they still persist. They will still try and get. If your daughter doesn't pay them back, they will do whatever it takes to get it. And they'll take her car, they'll take her house, they'll take whatever she's got. They're not bothered. What I'm saying is stop them there as well, because they are blasé. They've had it their own way for so long. They haven't followed the rules. They didn't feel it was necessary. They felt above the law. So we're just reminding them they're not. And there's very, very valid arguments that you can use when they don't follow procedure. You're expected to toe the line. You're expected to comply with the law, aren't you? So are they. They forget that, though. So I'm not a different take to John, just a slightly different approach. Because we need to fight them. We need to fight them everywhere.
Trouble is they make the rules.
Correct. But they have to still comply with those rules.
How comes
But if the
money
rule that
has
they've
been
got-
devalued?
Pardon?
How come that money has been devalued? You could buy a house 60 years ago for a couple of £1,000. Today you'll pay £200,000 for the same building at least.
Because there's more of what it used to be. They've put more, so much more. They've devalued it literally. That's what inflation is, as John was saying. The amount of money
They've
in the
increased
system.
the money supply.
they increase the money supply.
Every
They
time.
have to, because otherwise everyone would go bust. Because of this 100 and 105, it's so sorry, Ian, I'm butting in on your bit, but it's because of that gap that they have to increase the money supply. Otherwise, nobody would be able to pay back. No one would be able to pay, or perhaps a few people would, but the game would be over too quickly.
When you borrow money,
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't
You're
make
right,
sense.
absolutely. But when you borrow money, if you went into the bank for a loan of £10,000, do they give you £10,000? They will give you numbers on a computer screen. They don't physically go and bring back £10,000. The amount of money they've got on deposit doesn't reduce by £10,000 because they've given it to you. They put numbers on the screen. What's actually happened is that it's increased by £10,000 because by you signing that loan agreement, you create £10,000. That's how it actually works. So far from lending you the money, you've actually lent it them. That's what the figures will show.
And then they lend on that.
Yeah, and
They lend 9 times. That's the,
correct.
Yeah.
The £10,000 that you borrow, they give you a piece of paper that's worth absolutely nothing. It's worth the paper that it's written on until you sign it. When you sign that, it becomes £10,000 or whatever the figure may be,
£10,000 of debt.
In their bank.
which you deposit into their bank and they'll lend back to you, plus interest. That is how mad the system is. And so each time somebody borrows money, they're creating more debt. Each time there's more money created, debt is created into the system, it devalues what's already there. And as you just said there, perfect example of what a house was worth 60 years ago, what it costs you to buy one now, is a prime example of the amount of money in the system now compared to the amount of money that there was then, and its value.
It's just a question or a query about penalty clauses when you actually borrowed money from banks. If you actually pay it back within a much quicker time than the agreed repayment period, they don't seem to like that very much.
No, no. Again, it's actually in law, there is a given formula where, you know, they have to
They
reduce
don't
the
want you to
amount.
pay it back technically, do they?
Pardon?
They don't technically want you to
Absolutely
pay
not.
it back as
No.
quickly.
Well, not long ago they were writing to credit card holders who weren't using the cards. Don't want them. Then you're not good to them if you're not using your card.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. They want you to have it as long as possible, and then when you've paid it off, have another one.
I've got a friend of mine that hasn't got any credit cards. She's always got money in her bank. She's got, you know, a fair bit of money behind her. Her credit rating
No.
is about the same as mine.
Yeah.
And mine isn't good. Hers, and I've had a few credit cards in my time and challenge them. But she's got a bad credit rating because she hasn't
got
had
no
to
debt.
borrow money. And
She's got no debt.
because she's got no debt. If you have lots of debt, you build up your credit rating.
They like it.
In fact, mine will probably be building back up because it's probably, I don't know, it's getting on for 18 months, so I could probably go out and get another credit card tomorrow after having to have what's called a basic bank account with absolutely no overdraft. So I've had to sort of like be good for a little while, but they say, oh, it's been good for a little while, and we'll give them a credit card now, even though, you know, it's madness, madness. These people are very, very greedy.
And to take it a stage further, it's going to be a cashless society. They don't like you using cash these days. It's all debit card, credit card. So if everything's on plastic, and suddenly you're a bad lad, suddenly you don't follow their rules, they put a mark on your name. You can't use your plastic. Then where'd you go? You know, you can see where it's headed. There's absolutely no doubt they want control of everyone and everything.
A press of a button on a computer and you
Can wipe
suddenly
you out.
don't exist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is where I really don't want to scaremonger, but if they had their way, I think what they would be doing is, as I'm sure a lot of you have come across the RDIF, is it the RDF or RFID chips?
Oh, the chips.
Radio
yeah.
frequency chips. And that would have, you know, basically you'd have a chip. The reason my cat was found before he had to be put down is because he was chipped. I didn't chip him, but because we got him from a rescue home, they were able to actually find him. Now, if they used that information on that chip, so the cat, you know, if that chip was in me, and they said, oh, we'll put your bank balance on it as well, and then you have to play their system. Well, you don't. You can actually, but it's very, very difficult to pay for certain things without. There are people that, I do a lot of work where we actually trade something for something else, and there's a lot of that going on as well.
Trying to do away with the checks now.
Yeah.
That'd be the next thing to go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they already
How
have
do you
done
send
almost.
something through the post to something if you buy something? You use a
What
check,
post?
don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
what
can
post?
see how it's evolving from straightforward cash that you used to save up now to something that we all rely on so heavily, your daughter, you know, it's just a way of life that they can literally turn it off.
What do we do if we want to put £3 in there, you know, in cash.
John takes credit
Credit
cards.
card.
Yeah.
It'll be a case of good morning slaves, wouldn't it?
Well, it has been for ever since we first started, hasn't it? A long time ago. It's just people are becoming aware now.
Yeah.
In
Only because they've become so greedy that it's hit the headlines.
well, but that's what greed breeds, doesn't it? Greed breeds more greed. It has to. If you're greedy and you're doing well, you always want more. And that's exactly what they're doing. In America now, I think it is Bank of America, have stopped the foreclosures in so many counties because people are beginning to say, hang on, you can't do this. And they're beginning to challenge them. And now they've stopped doing it because they were going to court and they were losing.
It's not just Bank of America, it's a whole bunch more. General Motors Corporation and most of the lenders now.
Because they kept getting the bloody nose, yes. And they realised it's cost them a lot more money and the credibility if there was any left. So that's not because, they're not doing that because they're being nice guys. They're doing that because they've been found out. So when you talk about, people do say there's a moral obligation. When you read what the stunts they will pull, the tricks they get up to. There was I was reading a piece that somebody had entered into a parliamentary debate, and there was submissions from Citizens Advice Bureau, and there was a whole list of things that people have been put through. You know, for minimal debts. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of pounds for houses. We're talking hundreds of pounds on small credit cards. You know. And what they will do for that. So moral obligations, unfortunately, as John says, where did it come from in the first place? And then what they're prepared to do to have their way, they have to go a long way to convince me that they have any moral right to claim anything. They've created a system where they can turn it on and off, and they're getting it more and more. So while we've still got these rules, we'll use them.
Look at the billions Goldman Sachs have been paying to their, and there's another load, isn't there? They're having to pay even billions more apparently coming up soon.
Well, John touched on then Goldman Sachs with the fraudulent and what they were up to in billions of pounds, and they were fined 450 million.
Yeah.
You know, it's chicken feed.
Yeah.
But when we realised that Goldman Sachs, as Max Kaiser says, Goldman Sachs is Wall Street.
Yeah.
You know, Barclays is the Bank of England. It's effectively, the Bank of England is we think of the Bank of England as part of our government. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Private company.
It's a private corporation,
Are they
totally
paying-
private.
Are they paying their workers to keep them silent?
Well, yeah,
These
well,
billions?
of course, because if you're in a situation, there's very few people that actually jump ship and say, what I'm doing is fraudulent. And I can think of 3 people, and they get up and say, no, this is wrong. And Max Kaiser is brilliant because he's done it. Charlie Veitch, he's done it from the Love Police. And Simon, his surname is?
Davis?
Simon Davis, yeah. He's been getting around talking, he keeps under the radar,
He's
but
frightened, isn't he?
if you do... Say again?
He's frightened for his life.
Well, yeah, he's
not frightened, but he's aware.
He's aware, yeah. I've had people say to me with what I'm doing, I should be frightened. I'm not, you know. They are the ones that should be frightened because the game is almost up for them. And it's funny, I know you said that I've had exactly the same question asked to me about, well, hang on, you had the money, you might as well pay it back. Well, the scenario I try and think of is that if I lent you £1,000, okay, and you'd gone out and spent it, and you'd bought your telly and been on holiday, or you probably just buy a telly these days for that much, yeah. But so if you'd spent the money, and then as you're spending the last pound, you realise that the money I gave you was counterfeit, totally counterfeit, and it didn't cost me anything, and I basically created it out of thin air, and so I created it fraudulently. Would you pay me back?
Would you feel an obligation to
Would you feel an obligation to pay me
How
back?
slum's the guy who made the telly? You know, someone's
given
He's been
them
paid.
something,
Mhm.
yeah. They're not suffering, because why should they suffer? You know, I understand you're doing it as a protest, it's not just to get lots of free stuff and live.
We could, with what we know, I could have kept the scam going and going and going. I now, rather than make lots of money about it, and what I do, if you get on to, I've got some cards with my website on it, and I've got a little 10-minute video on the front, and I talk about it, and halfway, what I say the basic rules about it. I say, be truthful, be honest, and don't be greedy. If you're going to be greedy, then you're going to end up like the bankers themselves.
You're playing their game.
If you're, and the only reason you'd want a bigger car and a bigger house and more holidays and more is because there's probably something inside of you that feels very, very empty. And when you feel actually very comfortable with yourself, then you can get off this treadmill of more, and you can say, no, I mean, I've actually got off the grid. I'm now living in a caravan in the woods with the idea of building a straw bale, environmentally friendly or low impact building to actually live in, because I don't need I did have beautiful house with a big sea view, big garden, and I could have kept it on. It's a struggle, but I could have kept it going, and I could have certainly got credit cards and done it like that. But I'm thinking, no, I don't want to play the game. I want to actually get downsize, get off the grid. Now, if I need water, I pull it along in an aqua roll. I've got one of these fantastic aqua rolls, and anyone thinking about getting off grid needs an aqua roll if they're going to pull water across any sort of distance. And yeah, I'm not completely off the grid because I've got a mobile phone. I still got a bank account, but I'm not. I was paying 200 quid a month in electricity charges because I had an old house that had storage heaters and it was rented. I was paying 200 quid a month in council charge. Now I'm paying £35 a week in rent and rate and everything. And okay, I pay a bit of gas, and it's a fantastically, it's a wonderful feeling of freedom. Also, my heating gave up the other day, just as it plunged to about zero last night. So, but once I'm sorted in there, it will be organised. But it's like, yeah, I've done it, but I haven't done it out of greed. I've done it to challenge these people. And I feel I go to a what would you call it, meditation group, and a lady there. I'd done a little presentation to the groups because they were interested in what I was doing, talking about banks and things like that. And she said, well, I couldn't possibly do what you do because I go to a spiritual church and we take personal responsibility very, very seriously. And I said, well, actually, I take my personal responsibility very seriously as well. And my personal responsibility is to make people aware of this fraud which is happening to us and stand up for people. There's an awful lot of people, there are people taking their lives because they're in debt, because of this system and because of the injustice in the system. And I think that anyone that stands up to it, if you pay it back, you're perpetrating the fraud. In the same way as paying off, if people, if you've got the mob coming round, gangsters coming around saying you've got to pay us, these people are gangsters.
What's the difference?
And in fact, they're called banks. People refer to them as banksters. Gangsters, yeah.
Look at the farmers that have been committing suicide over the years.
All to pay it back. Yeah. And I actually had a phone call today, and the lady said to me, she said, would you like me to, make a contribution, or I'm happy to do that. I said, I don't want money for it. No intention of taking it that. No, absolutely not. That's not what I'm doing this for. Just making people aware. As ever, you've got to do your own work. Don't expect anyone to do it for you. But the fact is, once you know exactly what's going on, the obligations actually turn the other way. I now feel an obligation to make people aware.
Can I quickly use the foreclosures thing to illustrate a point here? We were talking about foreclosure. In America, what we would call repossession is foreclosures. They foreclose on you and take your house off you. And there's something going on at the moment which some people are referring to as foreclosure gate, because the chickens come home to roost. It's taken about 3 years. But what the mortgage companies were doing, as has been mentioned, with all debts, it's not just mortgages, they don't just supposedly loan you the money, but once they've got you tied up in debt, they then sell that debt on to other companies, another company. And if they're keeping it all in one place, several years later, somebody would actually have the mortgage document and be carrying the debt and come after you for the money. But these people got so damn greedy, what they started doing, and people were getting paid incredible amounts of money for organising this. They would get good debt and bad debt. They would get somebody who had a really solid job, big mortgage, was always going to pay his mortgage on time, all the time, and at the opposite end of the scale, somebody who didn't have a job, shouldn't have had a mortgage in the first place, and was definitely going to default, and everything you can imagine in between. And they bundled them all together, chopped them up into little pieces, and sold them all over the world. And the people that they sold them to did the same thing again, and again, and again. And this was obvious 2 or 3 years ago. And it's taken this long for the American people to wake up and put their foot down, and they are putting their foot down. And what they've realised is that somebody decides they're going to foreclose on a family, and all the family's got to do is say, okay, show me the mortgage deed then. Show me show me proof that I owe you the money. And they can't do it. And it's really happening now in America. And it's going to happen in this country as well, with repossessions.
And
it's on my website.
There's a website that's generating the letters, isn't there? You put your details in, press the button, and it creates the letters.
Absolutely. And can I just pay tribute to Paul Shepherd here, because I've had a bit of praise here from Jon on Inquiring Minds website. Well, it would never have happened without the expertise of Paul here. In actual fact, that article quoting Lord Acton, I'm afraid that came from him as well.
Thank you.
So
I thought it was excellent.
Cheers.
Yeah.
But the foreclosures thing and the principle of selling on debt just really ought to illustrate just how greedy, selfish, mean and downright evil these people are.
Clever though.
Oh, clever.
Yeah, not stupid.
Can't take that away from you. Absolutely.
But if you think, there's a couple of things that sort of came up earlier that I was going to mention. One of them was this sort of like the other way of looking at it. If you realise that the money was counterfeit, would you pay it back? That's one thing. Because I've had that question a few times, and it's been difficult because I've got call it a spiritual background anyway. So I feel that if anything that I do which harms anyone else, there will be some sort of consequence at some sort of time. I can't explain it any more than that. It's a difficult thing to explain. But it was interesting that the websites you were mentioning, Consumer Action Group, Legal Beagles, what was the other one?
Penalty charges.
Yeah.
I think is another one.
Well, certainly Legal Beagles, Consumer Action Group, and Get Out of Debt Free. It's funny they mentioned those because they were all mentioned by there's an organisation called the CSA, not the Child Support Agency. It's actually called the Consumer Services Association, which sounds lovely, doesn't it? What a lovely, friendly organisation. What it is, actually, I refer to it as the Society of Scumbag Debt Collectors, because basically that's what it is, the trade body for debt collectors. And in their infinite wisdom, they decided that there are websites that should simply be removed from the internet. Now, I've no idea what gave them the authority, apart from the fact that it's costing them a lot of money by challenging them. But this CSA, it actually, what they did, they actually had a big conference and did a big slideshow, and one of the Guardian reporters was actually there. This was last year, I think, or might have been the year before, I can't remember. But anyway, this Guardian reporter wrote it all down, did an article for the Guardian, put it on the Guardian website, and not only that, they actually put every time they put in Consumer Action Group, getoutofdebtfree.org, hyperlinks straight back to the website. So whereas my website was about, you know, struggling around on the second or third page of Google, suddenly by being linked to a major newspaper and having shed loads of hits, I got a call from my Webby, phoned me up and say, shit, the hits are going through the ceiling, you know. Basically, yeah, we were just getting an awful lot of people, everyone on the Guardian website, oh, there's a story up here, bang, click. And so that really helped. Now, my Google ranking, it tends to be, if you put out, there's certain phrases that it's particularly good. If you just put get out of debt, it tends to be either first or second under the adverts on the first page of Google. It's actually quite often it comes up above one of the government websites, which is great. The only thing I feel bad about is if you put in Mary Elizabeth Croft, it's actually occasionally coming up, you know, some of my videos come up above hers occasionally, which I don't feel good about because I've got a lot of, you know, I just think without her I couldn't have done what I did, but or what I'm doing and what we're doing as well, because whereas it started off with myself, you know, I started this up purely because I thought, well, I want some letters, so I've got to be some template letters for what I want to do, and there weren't any, so I thought, well, let's do some. And the other thing is about, you know, we're talking about greed and, well, hang on, you know, being greedy, is that with my Google ranking, I could take advertising, I could take swap links, there's an awful lot of things I could charge for the templates, there's a lot of things I do. I give the templates away for free. If you want them for free, you have to wait until I actually log on, and sometimes you'll get them free within half an hour, sometimes you might have to wait a day or so to get your password to be able to log in to the site. But everyone gets on there for free. If you want it immediately, you can pay a £5. And so, because those people that want it there and then, very quickly, we make enough income to be able to cover those people that are doing an awful lot of work on the site. So, which is my Webby, myself, and one of the chaps on the forum who's now, you know, become a partner in it. So, but we couldn't exist without the help of people like Paul and Malcolm, who are also regulars on the forum as well. So, because it's now like a community. It's I can't believe where it's gone to, and I was hoping, as I say, we've had computer problems today. Well, cat and computer problems together combined. That although I've normally got a very sort of swanky, you know, I can go click and then talk about something, but we've sort of gone a little bit sort of sideways, and it's quite interesting. You know, the areas that we've covered. So we were going to sort of have a break halfway through for people to have a break and then start up again, but I don't know, we can have a break and then do a little bit more, or we could just have a question and answer session, or I could go off in another direction. I don't know, what would you recommend?